Hi everyone, welcome back to the Earthdawn Survival Guide, a podcast for all disciplines, paths, players, and game masters, and enthusiasts like Josh and myself. I am Dan.
I am Josh.
We've almost got this down pat after 68 tries, where I don't step all over Josh's introduction. So on today's podcast, we'll be discussing all things ecumenical and theological. It is part 5 of our ongoing series, our closed, limited series, about the Passions and the Questors. Today is Mynbruje and Thystonius. So for those of you who are looking for a Dis and Vestrial square-off, not going to happen. Sorry, we did Dis last time. Today is Mynbruje and Thystonius, the mental versus the physical. Kind of go from there. If you have any questions for us, please feel free to email us at edsgpodcast@gmail.com. Josh, any opening thoughts before we get down to the nitty-gritty?
Nope.
Fair enough. Okay. On to Mynbruje, and something I want to bring up at the end of the discussion on Mynbruje is what we have failed to do. We did the first couple times around, but failed to do the last 2 times, which is let's take the Questor to the extreme, where we kind of say they get a little lost on their questing, and they get to that higher level devotion and begin to be one of those tweaked ones. So as we get through the discussion, we can get there on Mynbruje.
Yeah, well, with the previous episode, we had Garlen, who
yes.
I'm not sure how caring for people can be taken into an extreme that is potentially dangerous.
The only thing I can think of is Munchausen's by proxy, where you cause the harm so that you can cure the harm.
Yeah, I suppose that's one possibility. And then the other...
That's the only one I can think of.
If anybody else has ideas... we welcome
Please send them in.
Please send them in. We will be happy to take your emails about that. And the other that we had in that one was Dis, who is a mad passion. And so...
That's easy.
The very nature of that one is everything that the Questors are doing is bad and destructive and whatnot. So there wasn't really a need to discuss that with them.
Not so much. Not so much. So on to Mynbruje, who is the passion of justice, compassion, empathy, and truth. So a little overlap with compassion in Garlen, even though she's healing, but the justice, empathy, and truth reminds me of the elements, the balance scales. What other elements are stars? I'm a little unfamiliar with, but we can go talk about that as well. But the executioner's axe and comfortable places of rest. So those are, of course, at odds, but I like the idea. So Mynbruje is basically you're walking, not executioner, but judge, maybe jury as well, or you're defending lawyer, you're prosecuting lawyer. Take your pick. So I can't say there's a legal system, but there's part of that. We're here to balance the scales of civilization interaction with one another. Yeah,
the idea of justice being taken to an extreme. I mean, we can talk about that now.
Go for it.
Rather than saving it for the end.
Yeah.
You talk about, hey, Batman.
I was looking at Judge Dredd, but yeah.
Well, Judge Dredd, there's another good one that the idea of justice being taken to an extreme at the expense of compassion or understanding.
Yeah.
That when you are focused so much on justice, and I'm putting air quotes around that, particularly with regards to Judge Dredd, because that is a satire. It is a dark, sort of darkly comic kind of situation. It is a dystopian kind of situation where there is actually not really any justice there. Maybe it was originally the idea that there was justice, but there's the law.
Yeah.
There is no sense of what is justice. And the essay, the Questor, who's the narrator for the Mynbruje essay in the book, does talk about justice as a concept and what does that mean? And how does that tie into the other aspects of compassion and truth and empathy that are all kind of part and parcel of the whole deal of Mynbruje? But if you take justice, you get into this avenging angel kind of situation. Maybe not Batman so much as Azrael. from the sort of post-Nightfall situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because...
where Azrael is presented as a reflection of Batman, taking the aspect of justice further than Batman's code allows him to, in terms of death and injury and whatnot.
Yeah, because if you bend justice too far, to use your Batman and Azrael example, and even Judge Dredd, Batman sees himself as justice and a little bit of punishment. Azrael and Judge Dredd are punishment under the guise of justice.
Yeah.
They're just punish. That's it. Hopefully they'll stamp it all out. No compassion, no nuance to their view of justice.
Society operates on rules, on a common agreement.
Yes.
By being a part of society, you sort of are tacitly and, to a certain extent, at least initially, unconsciously taking part in the social contract.
Mm-hmm.
In the agreements and rules that a society, whether a single village or a city or a kingdom, all kind of operate under. And when that social contract is fractured or broken or damaged, for society to continue to function, there needs to be some sense of restoral, of responsibility that goes along with it.
Yeah.
And that sort of thing. And that's the idea of justice. I mean, holy cow, justice is a big deal. There's a lot of it, and people protest and take to the streets about justice, and there's a lot of...
Yeah, because once a law or a rule is exploited, you have to make a new rule or new law to fix that, and so that there's a balance between all levels of population. And that's, like you said, the societal contract. And so the essence of laws is to make it as equal as possible.
I want to caution against the idea of justice is just laws. That's not really the case, because then you get to the Judge Dredd situation. Yeah. And I think the thing that Mynbruje represents, and that Questors of Mynbruje should strive to embody, is tempering that sense of justice with compassion and empathy and understanding, is that...
practicalities?
Let's talk Les Miserables here. If somebody steals a loaf of bread to feed their family, they have broken the law. They have broken the social contract, which is to say that you don't take things that don't belong to you. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, if somebody is in such a poor situation, if somebody is impoverished and starving to the point that they need to steal bread to feed their family, then that is also the breaking of a social contract.
Yeah, that's been broken somewhere else upstream.
It's not necessarily as blatant or as easily grasped as the idea of thou shalt not steal, but society has not provided for a member of that society.
Yeah.
That there are individuals that have fallen through the cracks that are not being provided the opportunity to work, to earn the money to buy that bread.
Yes.
For whatever various number of circumstances there may be. Society has in some sense failed them. Is that just? Is that justice? Like how, in that kind of situation, one of the big drivers of crime in general is poverty and people being in a situation where they are not afforded the opportunity, where society, broadly speaking, is not supporting them to be able to live.
Exactly. Yeah, because in the essay, there's a whole story about the theft of an apple from the apple tree, and that the thief was never told empathy for either the tree or the community he's stealing from, and so therefore doesn't regard it at all. So it's part of that whole empathy and compassion and social building that is required in the whole scope of society, as you said. So yeah. So the powers that Mynbruje himself has is they can read minds, and they can ease suffering. They can also perceive obscure clues like Sherlock Holmes. I love that. And they can travel instantly through thoughts from Namegiver to Namegiver. So this is the mental aspect of Mynbruje and what they can bring. So, but back to the essay. What other essay ends with a haiku? I mean, come on.
Only yours, Dan. This is the other essay that Dan wrote for this book.
I will take pride in this one more so than the Garlen essay because I was more proud that this one came out the way it did. So I was very, very happy with it. So Questors of Mynbruje in general and devotees of Mynbruje in general these are your demonstrators, your lawyers, your journalists, those who have been born with a sense of fairness and rightness in the world. They say, yeah, I look at something that's imbalanced as far as a power structure is concerned, and they want to correct that, or they at least need to voice their opinion of it. So these otherwise might be your journalists who say, I can't take down a big, polluting company, but I can at least write about it and inform everybody else because information is power. So this is maybe your devotees. Any other examples you can think of?
Judges, obviously. If you're talking about the old school style, to bring up a bit of trivia here, the reason that in the United States, the different divisions of the federal courts are called circuits is because originally the idea was that each of the Supreme Court justices was assigned a circuit, and that was the area that they would ride around in and perform rulings. That obviously stopped really, really quick because it wasn't feasible for them to do so. But that's sort of the idea. You talk about the territories and the judges in the classic Old West 19th century kind of thing, where the judge would make trips to certain places, and when the judge came, they would hear the cases that were kind of pending in that particular village or town or borough or whatever. Once they had done their jobs there, would move on to the next one. And so judges, obviously, but also negotiators, counselors of a sort, therapists.
Those who ease the suffering,
to ease the suffering, to kind of get to the truth of the matter, of adjudicating problems in relationships, even if you're not necessarily talking about law per se that had been broken. But if there's any kind of breakdown of the social order of the justice that would go there, diplomats, any of those kind of social roles that allow and help grease the wheels of society in a positive way, that allow society to continue to function, to represent the trust that people have in institutions in a sense, whether that institution is actually embodied in a government or whether that's embodied in a philosophical ideal, the trust in Mynbruje as a passion, that those who are devoted to Mynbruje are going to come and fulfill that societal role and that societal obligation. There is a word that I have been thinking of that I cannot bring to mind right now. Diplomats, therapists,
not counselors,
negotiators, counselors, I don't know. But that kind of role where somebody is going to be, that there is a mix of the social and the intellectual there. King Solomon, as an example, like the stories that you have of Solomon and the two women came before him and had one woman's baby had died and there was just the one baby that survived. How do you make the judgment that there's intelligence and wisdom and compassion and understanding that goes along with that? That is sort of Mynbruje's whole thing.
So if you can think of that word, email us. So they can think of, so if the listeners can think of that word you're looking for, email us your suggestions. We'll run them through the next show and see what Justice. Yeah, that was the one. Or you'll think of it right after we sign off, which is also fine.
I'll think of it later,
which is also fine.
I think Mynbruje can be overlooked as a patron for adventuring groups in a way. Like if the idea of your adventuring group are to be kind of troubleshooters or people that go and deal with problems. And sometimes that involves violence, but there's still like a reinforcement in a sense of a social order and the way that things work. That Mynbruje actually can serve a role in a sense of a patron for adventurers, for wandering troubleshooters and perhaps semi-ne'er-do-wells. That if the group is heroic in nature and is looking to solve problems and help people, this is especially suited to more of a semi-wilderness based campaign where you're going to be perhaps encountering more smaller hamlets and villages where people don't necessarily have the larger bureaucratic structures of a city or a kingdom or other large power to rely on So that's something that can be looked at as a way of maybe bringing Mynbruje into a game.
Yeah, like I said, I'm playing right now. He just got the 5th Circle Scout, and we're playing in and around the city of Iopos against the Demonstrators clan. So I'm looking at maybe following, not because I wrote the essay, but because we are righting a bunch of wrongs, smaller wrongs within the city, and slowly pushing back against the power structure of the Demonstrators, where I'm like, yeah, I might want to be taking a side jaunt as a questor for Mynbruje. So, and again, not because I wrote the essay.
Yeah, Mynbruje actually can be fairly strongly associated with scouts because of their perceptive abilities and whatnot. Archers as well, or at least the school of archer thought that is very direct and to the point and seeking targets and seeing things. But also troubadours. A certain school of thought of troubadour would be very appropriate association with
singing truth to power. Yeah.
Weaponsmiths with their strong community centeredness and often seen as a leader and responsible individual within a community could end up channeling Mynbruje when they are adjudicating disputes between members of the community that they are serving.
Yeah. So one of the elements I found is, I can't say confusing, but it doesn't make sense to me. So we have the balanced scales, which makes sense for Mynbruje, the executioner's axe for the far end of justice, and the comfortable places to rest is the other far end, the two opposite scales there. The stars is one of the elements of Mynbruje.
I think part of that has to do with the associations that the stars have with knowing and astrology and seeing.
Gotcha.
I think it's kind of a symbolic representation in that sense, to borrow from inspiration a little bit from Tolkien.
Fair.
The idea that the learned, that the elves and the wizards and so forth
have
depicted with wise people with stars on their brow kind of situation, that's an image that goes along with that in a very different way, that the sun is in a way associated with Floranius because of the life and the energy and the motion that comes from that. The stars are a very intellectual.
That's okay. I was looking at more of the stars of like maybe a police badge, but the more esoteric pre-formation of that.
Yeah. There's less of a sense within Barsave, even among the larger cities and whatnot. The concept of police as a thing is actually relatively recent. There is a difference between city guards, who are kind of there to keep the peace, and police who are ostensibly investigating crimes and wrongdoing.
Yeah.
I know in the Thrall source book, the original Thrall source book, there is a lot of expectation because police kind of developed, in a sense, from city guards and those sorts of things. Also the idea of sheriff as a position within the social order and the responsibilities that they would have.
Yeah.
There is some of that association there, but I would not think of the stars associated with Mynbruje because of the star of a police badge.
No.
That doesn't occur to me. I think it's valid. Okay. I think it's an interesting take. Police is not really something that I feel exists within a fantasy setting as a concept, at least as we understand it.
No, like I said, stars kind of caught me, and for the last 3 or 4 hours, I was thinking.
I am not one to reject an idea that actually could work for someone.
Yeah, fair enough. So, if you quest for Mynbruje, here are some of the devotions you can. Here are some of the powers you can get as a follower, and later on an adherent, ranks 5 and 8, 5 through 8, and then as an exemplar, ranks 9 and above. So, as a quester of Mynbruje, you get awareness, book memory, conversation, empathic sense, passions empowerment, which we've talked about before, passions insight, we've also mentioned before, photographic memory. I believe this one's new. It's a knack.
Photographic memory is a knack. It's a book memory knack.
Yeah.
So it allows the questor to remember scenes the same way that they could remember a book.
Yeah.
Very useful for an investigative kind of approach to things because it allows them to remember a scene. Like if they're investigating a crime, they can use book memory to remember the layout of the room and where things were and call that back to mind later on.
Yes. And to go along with that, remember conversation. Again, like they're...
Which I think is also a knack based off of book memory.
You are correct.
Yeah, remember conversation is also an act, so those are both in the companion. And it is also based off of book memory.
Yeah.
So it allows them to remember conversations the way that they would otherwise be able to remember a book.
So this goes along with the audio and the video. So basically they can recite the movie that they have in their head for whatever they're talking about. Then they get research and true sight, which is allows them to see through illusions and things.
Yeah, true sight is a bonus to pierce illusion magic.
Yeah. So those are your first 4 ranks. You can pick up 4 of those. So your adherent devotions, you get assess intentions, which I believe is also a knack.
Yes.
Astral sight, diplomacy, evidence analysis, incredibly useful. But a new one, Mynbruje's eye. And this, I think, enhances...
It provides bonuses to perception-based tests examining details. So it would provide bonuses to evidence analysis, awareness if you are looking for something specific, as opposed to just a general awareness, oh, do I notice what's going on?
Yeah.
If you are searching for something, it would provide a bonus. So it basically enhances the investigative abilities of
any of your other talents or powers.
Of any talents or powers that would do that.
Yeah, that's a big blanket. That covers a lot. So that's awesome. Passions inspiration, we've covered before. Psychometry, also very, very useful. And silence influence, so that none of the other passions can get in the way of what you're trying to deduce as a questor of Mynbruje. And so you're to your exemplar devotions and some new ones as well. Eidetic memory is a higher circle talent, I believe, in the companion.
Yes. I don't recall what it does off the top of my head.
I think it's, you can...
Does it enhance the ability of book memory?
I think it does. Because I think eidetic memory might be able to give to somebody else as well.
Okay. Eidetic memory provides bonuses to any test made to recover information. To recall information, which includes book memory. So it's not just book memory. It's any kind of knowledge test or anything like that.
Again, a very large blanket, which is fine. And then we get open mind, which is brand new. It's a questor power.
The questor enchants an object, in this case, a key.
Mm-hmm.
All of those within the area of effect are more persuasive and more receptive to new ideas.
Yeah.
The purpose that this is generally used for, I would imagine, by questors of Mynbruje is to persuade people who might be going on a witch hunt to open their minds to the possibility of alternate evidence and theories.
Fair.
It's not mind control. It doesn't force anyone to believe something other, but it does modify tests and defenses based on what they are trying to do.
Yeah, this influences the debate about two sides of a coin going on. And then we also have passions comfort at the exemplar devotion level, and we've talked about that before. Resist influence as well. Resist taunt, always useful. And the last one, touching the past, which is the knack that we talked about with Carolus, where you get to hold the object in your hand and decipher more of its meaning and history behind it, not necessarily getting any key knowledges, but you get some history about that as well. So also very good for evidence discovery. So
there's a lot of intellectually social stuff that they get, a lot of powers that will enhance their ability to investigate.
Yeah.
As part of their thing of being related to truth and justice and all of that.
Yeah.
So they get a lot of stuff that helps in that avenue, as well as some social stuff, but not in the same way that some other questors or, say, a troubadour and that sort of thing would be.
Yeah.
They rely more on their reputation for fairness and clear-headedness, as opposed to being a schmoozer and glad-hander and
fast talker,
social climber.
Yeah. Fair. So if somebody's not exactly high enough or devoted to be a questor, what could somebody who's just a devotee do to, or tell you what, we haven't talked about this yet at all. How do we lace in a questor of Mynbruje or a follower of Mynbruje into a gameplay for certain game masters? How do we approach this for the players to be introduced to?
Sure. Having an NPC in an adventure or in an area that they might be spending time who is a follower of Mynbruje, who is perhaps a judge or investigator or something along those lines, might turn to a player character group for assistance in investigating the truth of something. Because if evidence points to something being more dangerous, because Questors of Mynbruje, again, like most Questors, don't have durability or the sort of physical capabilities to handle more dangerous situations. Perhaps if they are defending or investigating claims that someone is associated with a horror or mad passion or something like that, where the physical danger that could potentially be present, they would look to a group of trustworthy and likely impartial adepts to help investigate what might be going on.
So kind of an easier way for the game master to work in a questor of Mynbruje as an NPC to maybe tag along with the party, or at least get the adventure idea, laid out in front of them.
Get the adventure hook from them.
Yeah.
As is the case with any kind of situation where you've got an NPC that is not likely to have the same kind of physical endurance that player characters are.
Yeah.
You're going to need to be careful about how you handle that situation, just from a numbers perspective. But it absolutely could be somebody that would, maybe for the course of a story or adventure, might be going along with the group. So that's one possibility. I talked earlier about Mynbruje as a kind of potential patron for adepts, for adventurers in general, if they're the kind that are going to be journeying to right wrongs and so forth. Certain approaches of Swordmaster might be inclined towards Mynbruje. I think any kind of situation where you are dealing with society and the potential do's and don'ts, rights and wrongs that are a result of society, any time that justice cries out to be heard. Earthdawn, in one sense, the adepts can be kind of seen as superheroes.
Yeah.
I mean, they are heroes. They are legendary, they are legends. They are heroes. That is a thing that plays in very well to Mynbruje, the whole idea of truth, justice, and the Barsavian way.
Well said. I like that.
That is something that could be brought in fairly easily with a certain style of game, if there's a group that's going to be dealing with those sorts of things. And we talked about what is justice. It is not just, somebody broke the law. It is society doing what it should be doing in order to promote the welfare and health of all of its members. You want to bring in some punk vibes to it. There's a whole lot of potential there if you're going to be dealing with adepts who have power and influence and magic that they can bring to bear to upend unjust social orders. And you talked about your game where you guys are poking around Iopos.
Yeah.
There is a society, there is a culture that is in some respects broken and dominated in a way that is not healthy, that is not for the benefit of society as a whole, but for the benefit of the rich and powerful and those who have the power.
Yeah.
An adept group going up against that is acting in Mynbruje's stead.
So
there's a lot of potential to bring that sort of thing in if you're going to be going with a, for lack of a better term, social justice game.
Yeah.
I have obviously made no bones about my politics and my feelings on those matters.
No. I liked doing the Mynbruje essay. I like throwing Mynbruje in as an NPC or a adventure hook or a plot thing in there because, again, as you just brought up, the whole point of Earthdawn is to be a hero and be legendary. What better way to do so than by meting out justice and compassion along your trails? So there we are. Let's go tackle Thystonius because he would enjoy that.
He would like that.
I use that verb on purpose. On to Thystonius. Thystonius is the passion of physical conflict and valor. Now, a little bit different from
He's not a
Floranius.
war god.
It's not a war god, but also not a motion and revelry god. It's not like, hey, I feel alive when I'm doing this. That's not quite the same thing. It has to be a conflict. There has to be 2 or 3 things opposing one another to see who comes out better. And that's the thing about Thystonius. It can't just be, I'm going to go, base jumping. Well, yeah, that's you against the elements. That technically is, a little bit of physical conflict. But it's not just you.
You are, in a sense, you're pushing yourself.
Yes.
In that regard.
Yeah.
In comparison to Floranius, Thystonius there's much more of an exertion involved.
Mm-hmm.
There is a certain amount, perhaps, of joy and feeling of life that can come out of that.
Yeah.
I think the difference between Floranius and Thystonius when you're talking about that kind of situation is that Thystonius is about the destination, in a sense, is about the conquering, is about the overcoming. It's that aspect of it. Whereas with Floranius, it's more of just the motion itself. Thystonius is about the effort, and Floranius is effortless, in a sense.
Yeah.
There's a very kind of fluid...
Frolicking Floranius, as I say.
Yeah, not even, frolicking, yeah, fine.
I know, yeah.
The motion and the energy of Floranius comes across as very effortless. Mm-hmm. Whereas Thystonius, that motion, that drive, it's the striving, it's the stress, it's the effort involved in
this has
overcoming
to have an
the
outcome.
obstacle. And whether that obstacle is nature and the environment and the elements and whatever it is, or going up against another individual, whether that is
of some kind,
a race, whether that is a wrestling match, it is the effort, it is the work, it is the feeling of strain and the burn of the muscles and everything that goes along with that. That's a very different goal.
Yeah.
You could have followers of Thystonius and Floranius doing the same thing, but the mindset that they have while doing it, I think, would be very different. I really like, actually, how we've had so many examples through this series of places where different passions overlap in certain ways, in much the same way that you have disciplines that overlap in certain ways as well.
Absolutely.
But that it is the trappings and the emotion and the philosophy behind them that define the differences as opposed to what they can do. Both a warrior and a swordmaster stab things with sharp bits of metal, but the method and the philosophy and
the reasoning behind it,
and
their approach to doing that task is different.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like Floranius, I said in the episode, they're very up in ebullient life of the party people because they just enjoy the revelry and the motion and the exertion. Thystonius, these are your athletes. They have to have a goal at the end. These are the thrill seekers to push themselves harder to achieve something. The competitors, the soldiers, the exercisers. They're not just going to get up and go, yeah, I want to dance. That's a little bit different than I need to do 50 push-ups. I need to do 50 push-ups. I get up and I do laps every morning before anybody else is awake. The essay was fantastic on that, by the way. I wanted to narrate it as the guy in the bar being paid in drink for my stories. I wanted to narrate that. So whoever wrote that did a good job.
That was Rusty.
That was Rusty. Rusty plays on the podcast with you for...
Yes.
So we've heard Rusty. I like Rusty. I like where Rusty plays his character.
Rusty's
Rusty's a good egg. So Thystonius' elements are naturally weapons and banners and armor and battlefields. This is where things were opposed and happened.
Battle is a huge aspect of Thystonius. It's not the only one, but it is the one that tends to get the most focus, and why Thystonius is often viewed in some sense as the war passion, but it's not really the war that's the thing for him. He doesn't choose sides so much. It's the fact that you've got individuals striving against each other for survival, in a sense. Yeah. But it's not about the death and the killing.
It's about the victory.
Well, it's not even about the victory. He is not the passion of victory.
No.
He's the passion of conflict and competition and valor. And that is that win or lose, as long as you acquit yourself well within that conflict, that you are pushing yourself to your limits, whatever those may be.
Yeah. Well, and I like the fact that the essay made a point of saying it's not about just winning all the time, because you want to face your opponent at their best day, not necessarily their worst day. That way you win easily and it's a slaughter. It's not about just defeat after defeat of easy opponents. No. This is about a well-metered opponent against yourself, or yourself against a well-measured part of nature. And so it's an equal test at that time to see who's going to come out better. And that's what Thystonius is about.
It's testing limits.
Yes. So a lot of philosophy behind what would otherwise seem like an ordinary or easy passion to talk about, because, as you said, it's not the war. It's not the killing. It's the battle itself. It's the physical exertion. It's not necessarily, the art of war from Lao Tzu. Is it Lao Tzu?
No.
Sun Tzu. It's not Sun Tzu's art of war. It's it's not necessarily the strategy behind it. It's just overcoming your physical obstacles to get the job done. So that's more what it's about. So the powers that Thystonius brings himself is increased battle prowess, strength. He can overcome pain and travel to within 1 mile of any physical conflict instantaneously. I always love the instantaneous travel from the passions. That's one of my favorite parts. How could, since we talked about this early in the Mynbruje discussion, how could taking this Questor to an extreme kind of go wrong?
Well, it's approaching him as a war passion.
Fair.
It's about the conquest. It's about the defeat. It's about the bloodthirst.
Mm-hmm.
You want to kind of talk about an extreme example, the bloodlore moot of the Crystal Raiders in the Twilight Peaks.
There you go.
Because they're a murderous bunch of semi-psychopaths. They are a culture, a subculture that has taken that aspect of Thystonius's. Thystonius is super important to the Highland troll culture in a way. The Bloodlords have taken that into the dark end of things. That the Bloodlords and the other ones that are over on the western end of the Twilight Peaks there, whose name escapes me off the top of my head at the moment.
Me too.
Those are the ones that are taking that conflict to a irrational degree.
Mm-hmm.
It's the approaching it as the valor is in the victory. It's in defeat and in how you demonstrate your superiority over your opponent by how badly you beat them. It's a very sort of unhealthy approach. Bring poor sportsmanship into it.
I was just going to say, I was just going to use that exact phrase. Unsportsmanlike conduct.
Yeah, unsportsmanlike conduct, the kind of bad Little League parent behavior kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's an aspect where Thystonius's ideals are tainted and slanted in a not healthy way. And if that gets a hold on a broad scope within a subculture or society, then all of that violent energy ends up needing to be directed somewhere. And that ends up with conquest and imperialism and stuff like that.
Yeah. I was looking at the modern day analogy of just running up the score on your opponent because you can. Yeah, that's unsportsmanlike. That's not Thystonius' way.
Yeah, Thystonius really wouldn't take much pleasure in that.
No.
Because there's no challenge there. There's no...
Yeah, like I said, it's not an equal opposition.
Competition.
Yeah, I agree. So let's go ahead and, I think, break down some of the powers that you can get if you quest for Thystonius, unless you have any other ideas you want to get to first. Cool, because I think we got some new ones in here. I know, in fact, we have some we've never talked about before. So your follower devotion ranks 1, 2, 3, and 4. You get 4 of these when you start out. Avoid blow if you don't already have it as a quester, but you do get a durability of 5.
Do have availability of durability.
Yeah, so that's going to be helpful. Inspired might. I think that one's new. Yes.
No, this is one that has shown up with a couple of others. This is the one that allows the Questor to fill their targets with physical prowess, providing bonuses to strength stuff.
Gotcha. Okay.
Ragok gets this.
Right.
Somebody else does as well.
I think low coast, but we haven't covered low coast yet. Okay.
Anyway, it's available to a couple of others. But yeah, this is to inspire and provoke physical ability in the targets of the devotion.
No worries. Invigorate.
This is one that I think Floranius gets because it provides bonus to initiative and movement rate.
Yes, they get it as an exemplar. But here in Thystonius, they get it as a follower, so a lot earlier in the selection. If you don't have melee weapons, you get it now. Passion's Comfort, we've talked about. Passion's Empowerment, we've talked about. Resist Influence, Tactics, and Wound Balance. Because, again, getting knocked over is a bad thing.
Yeah. They get some stuff that helps enhance physical ability, some access to combat talents.
Yeah.
Not a war passion, but because battle is such a big aspect of Thystonius's
thing
portfolio.
Good word.
Their Questors having access to the basic physical to get magically empowered physical combat abilities makes sense for them.
Yeah. So those are your first 4 ranks for follower devotions. The adherent devotions, middle ranks, 5, 6, 7, 8, you get the Armor of Thystonius, which is obviously new.
That is new.
Questor power.
Armor of Thystonius allows the Questor to grant armor to people.
Nice.
They bellow encouragement at their allies, filling them with the spirit of Thystonius. They make a test. The targets gain +1 armor per success.
I love when we surprise Josh with that. He's like, oh yeah, this is cool. So I love those reactions. Battle Bellow, always useful. Encouraging Oratory, which I know we've come across before. Yeah. Inspired Endurance and Inspired Tenacity. I think those are...
Inspired Endurance allows the Questor to make people immune to the effects of fatigue for a certain amount of time. We've covered that with a couple of other passions.
Yeah.
Inspired Tenacity is a new one, though. That allows the Questor to provide bonuses to wound threshold.
Oh, very nice. Because as we've mentioned before, like 2 or 3 things affect wound threshold.
It actually does 2 things. It provides a bonus to wound threshold and reduces wound penalties as well.
Very nice.
So for each success, the target gains a bonus to wound threshold. And for every 2 successes, they reduce the penalties that they suffer from wounds.
And as we've said, not a lot of things affect wound threshold. So this is a very, very cool talent.
Yeah.
New to the whole list. Also, in the adherent devotions, you get leadership, which is kind of obvious why you would get that. Lionheart and Passion's Inspiration. So all of those I have no arguments with any of those. Not that I've argued with any of them so far. The exemplar devotions, you get Buttress Armor, which of course is the second place we've come across that.
Yep.
That's
available to Upandle. It basically allows a group to enhance the protective ability of armor for a limited period of time.
Yeah. And then Energy and Motion, which I think
Floranius I think, got
get
that.
As well. Yep.
Oh, yeah, that's the one that grants people free points to counteract strain.
Oh, right. Yeah, so obvious for Thystonius on that one. And then Gift of Life, which I think Garlen Questors get.
Yeah, it allows them to spend a devotion point as if it were a recovery test for the purpose of powering abilities that require recovery tests.
Nice. And then...
That would, depending on the exact wording and errata associated things, could potentially be used to power talents like Fire Blood and whatnot that are used in the midst of a conflict.
Yeah. So, very cool. Hone Weapon, which also...
that is Questors. Like Buttress Armor.
Yeah, Upandle Questors get that. And then Rally, which is a talent that Floranius Questors get as well. And then Vital Strike, which is very important for
that's
high circle talent.
Vital Strike, that's a damage enhancing. I think that's the one that can do potential multiple wounds.
I think so.
Oh, no. I was wrong. Looking that up. After a successful attack, the character using it can spend a recovery test to deal additional damage equal to the result of a Vital Strike test, which is rank plus toughness.
Woo!
That is a power that could be fueled by
Devotion.
the devotion that they can spend devotion points to fuel recovery test powers. But it's basically an additional bit of damage. It's just powered by recovery tests.
Yeah. So a lot of...
It is considered a separate damage test, so it could do an additional wound, and it is reduced by natural mystic armor.
Ooh, that'll do you.
And it can be used with close combat or ranged attacks. It's a high circle talent. It is nasty.
It is wonderful if you're using it. It's nasty if it's coming at you. But yeah, any further thoughts on Thystonius? Or since we did this with Mynbruje and have done this before, how do you work in a Questor of Thystonius or bring about the Thystonius passion? It's probably pretty easy since there's a lot of combat
Thystonius
in the game.
in some regards can be kind of like Garlen in that because so much of the adventurer's life frequently revolves around conflict and competition and so forth, whether that's combat or other things. Bringing Thystonius into the game in that aspect is something that is fairly easy.
Yeah. Well, even in...
But also any kind of situation where you've got games or competition, you've got Hakvar, I think is the name of it, the sport that they play in Thrall.
Yeah, I was...
any kind of organized team sport or competition of that sort would be something that that would be considered sacred to Thystonius. And so that's something that could be brought in.
I was thinking just the Tournament of Champions in Travar.
That's another one that could
If you got anything in and around
do
Travar,
that. Sure.
yeah, Thystonius can be brought in as you just have conversations with some of the champions or some of the contestants. One or two of them got to be.
If you want to deal with Highland troll culture, if you've got a game that runs up against that in some avenues or other, even if you're not dealing necessarily with the Bloodlords.
Yeah.
Thystonius is, as I mentioned, important to the Highland troll culture in many respects. They view the harshness of their life in the Twilight Peaks as a gift from Thystonius.
Yes. Many natural
They honor
obstacles to
him
overcome.
by struggling against each other and against the harsh environment that they are in. So that's something that could bring Thystonius in as well.
Absolutely. So, to your point, like I said, Thystonius is about as easy to bring in as would be Garlen.
Yeah,
So
in
the other
a
one's a
way.
little bit tougher, but I think Thystonius is pretty easy to work in there. Any further thoughts on Thystonius? Because it's kind of a quick summation of him there. It's pretty simple. You
Yeah.
know, physical conflict.
I think there's more subtlety that can be found with Thystonius, and I think the essay in the Questors book does a decent job of that,
Yeah.
bringing in other aspects, making Thystonius more than just the passion of war.
Yeah.
I think there's a differentiation there between war and conflict and the motivations behind it and the reasons for it. Obviously, war and battle and conflict can be bloody business.
Yes.
And so there is some aspects of that involved, but Thystonius is about the challenge and the effort, and it doesn't take sides
Yeah.
so much. If one side is being valorous and honorable and pushing themselves, and the other side isn't, then he will take the side of the one that is. But if both
Yes.
sides are doing their best, are pushing themselves forward, and
doing it the right
striving
way.
in that conflict, Thystonius is going to smile on them equally. The
Yeah.
passions, generally speaking, don't play politics. Their questors might, but the passions themselves are kind of above politics in that sense. If a society, if a group is honestly and legitimately pursuing the passions' ideals, those who might be running afoul of those efforts, passion is not necessarily going to get involved in that, or might even get involved in kind of supporting those efforts if they are sufficiently devoted and powered or fueled in a sense by one of their questors.
Yeah. So I
think that's going to be especially true in some ways of Thystonius. That is not necessarily the case for other passions to the same degree because of Thystonius's very strong association with battle and the violence that accompanies it, even if that's not his only thing.
fair points all around. So I think I know for a fact I'm enjoying all these discussions we're having. I think the listeners are as well. Only got 2 passions left. So
Only 2 to go.
Any questions for us coming up, because we haven't asked for them before, any questions coming up, by all means, let us know at edsgpodcast@gmail.com. Until then, thank you, Josh, for making the time.
As always, if you are not already on either the FASA Games Discord or following me on Twitter or following discussions in the Earthdawn Guild on Facebook, there are several different places where you can find other Earthdawn fans to ask questions and have discussions and all sorts of fun stuff like that. If you're just coming back, like our email from the previous episode with somebody who was just coming back to the game after being away for a while, there are places that you can go to
find us
and find other fans of the game.
Exactly. Other enthusiasts. So, folks, until next time, it is time for you to go quest for your own legend.
Good night, everybody.